Mr. Beers, I have a chart here, and I believe it comes from your testimony primarily, but about 11% of the overstays are actually reviewed. And when you look at overstay leads investigated, it's about 3% of the potential universe of overstays. That leaves about 89% outside of ICE parameters. First of all, is that accurate? And if it is, to me, that's very disturbing, particularly given the fact when you had somebody like Mr. Smotty who attempted a terrorist attack in my home state of Texas, who, as I understand it, would not be one of the leads investigated because of the criteria used by under the current situation.
Sir, the reviews we do are based on the national security criteria that ICE provides us with. Those numbers reflect the individuals who fall within the parameters of the national security criteria which ICE provides us with.
Yeah, and I understand that, and I know you have your parameters, but does that mean that about 89% of overstays are outside of the ICE parameters?
That's what the figures say.
Yeah. Again, I find that very troubling. I don't know what the answer is going to be here. I know that the budget, the 2011 budget requested completely eliminates funding for the comprehensive biometric exit program, a $22 million decrease. Mr. Morton, what are the chances of that? What are your thoughts about that?
With regard to the funding for U.S. visit, I would address that to Mr. Beers. To your earlier points, it's the basic challenge is the challenge that we face every day and that I've referred to earlier as an enforcement agency. We have more leads than we can address, and that's just the day-to-day reality that I face in running the agency. We're a big agency, but we have to prioritize. And in that, I focus first and foremost on national security. Next, we go to criminal offenders, then to maintaining basic support along the border and for fugitives. And
I understand you have to prioritize within the resources you have. I don't think you have enough. Have the parameters changed since the Smotty case?
There have been some changes, and in short answer your question is yes. I'd prefer to talk to you about that,
Sure.
not in a public setting.
And Mr. Skinner, you and I talked briefly before the hearing about this resource issue, and I think I don't want to paraphrase you, but you basically said to really address this, we're going to need a lot more resources thrown at it. And would you care to comment on that?
When we performed our review about 4 or 5 years ago, one of the things that we observed that was a tremendous backlog. In fact, about 53% of the total referrals to ICE were backlogged for over a year. It's my understanding, based on information we received as we monitor implementation and the improvements that ICE is making as they go forward, is that this backlog is still exists today. Our concern, and my concern would be, as we do our follow-up work, is how are we going to dig into that backlog? Because if you continue to maintain a backlog of tens of thousands of referrals of violators or potential violators, who among that group is in fact someone that we need to target right away? We don't have time on our side, so that's something that we will be focusing on as we move forward.
Well, thank you. And I think this is for the administration to propose a cut in resources to address this. I think it's not the right action. Mr. Alden.
Mr. McCaul, thank you. Would you just allow me to respond quickly on the Smotty case? Obviously, the government officials know many things that I'm not privy to, but my understanding of that case is when the sheriff in Texas contacted officials in Washington when he pulled over Mr. Smotty for the broken taillight, he was told that he was under FBI investigation, that Smotty was under FBI investigation. He was held in prison for a night and released the next morning. In fact, the operation that finally resulted in his arrest was set up by the FBI. If he had been identified and targeted as a visa overstayer and deported, it would have interfered with a critical law enforcement investigation. So I hate to see this case used as an argument for overstay tracking as a counterterrorism tool. I think it's a misunderstanding of what occurred in that case. I think that was a law enforcement success, not a visa tracking failure.
Well, and I agree with that. I think the FBI did an outstanding job, and you're right. They were working this case to get to where they finally did, and it was a successful law enforcement story. But if there are other smarties out there that the FBI is not working an investigation like this, yeah, I just think the criteria, the parameters should be addressed so that it would include individuals of his age, in a different case.
I mean, again, just to make the record clear, he was from a country that's tracked under the NSEERS program. Mm-hmm. There is an effective entry-exit system for people from those countries. So we would have known he was a visa overstayer.
That's good news.